Well, thank you all very much for being here this evening. We're really pleased that you came out as we honor America and honor our veterans tonight. Well, we're going to start the program in a moment, but first, before we start tonight, I would like to call for a moment of silence to remember the fallen who were victims of that horrific incident today at Fort Hood. Our servicemen and women were there, and it was a terrible tragedy today. So could I just ask for a moment of silence in their memory, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll honor their memory tonight by presenting this performance for you. Before we begin, I'd like all of our veterans to stand up. Any veterans in the house tonight? Let's stand up. Thank you for your service. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your service. We love you. We're glad that you're here tonight. So this is a very special program tonight, and we're glad that you're all here with us this evening to enjoy this. We've got some great things planned for you. Before we begin tonight, this is Riley Doyle. Doesn't he look great? He's going to introduce the national anthem, but before he does that, he's got a very special guest in the audience that he would like to introduce to you.
I would like to introduce my grandfather, Cliff Underwood. First Lieutenant Cliff Underwood. He was a twin-engine pilot in World War II. He flew the gasoline to the front lines of battle and the wounded back to the hospital. The mission he flew was Mission Varsity, where he flew across the Rhine River in France. And now, would you all like to stand for the...
Let's give him a hand. Let's give him a hand.
And he came all the way down to Reading to come here tonight. And now, would you all please stand for the national anthem?
Through the perilous fight, o'er the and became a poignant way to say farewell to our troops. After this number, please enjoy a rousing rendition of This Is the Army, the high-spirited title song of the hit World War II review starring members of our own armed troops.
There's a song in the land of the lily, each sweetheart has heard with a sigh. Over high-guarded walls, this sweet echo falls, as a soldier boy whispers goodbye.
Smile the while you kiss me sad adieu. When the clouds roll by, I'll come to you. Then the skies will seem more blue. Down in Lover's Lane, my dearie. Wedding bells will ring so merrily. Every tear will be a memory. So wait and pray each night for me, till we meet again.
Though goodbye means the birth of a teardrop, and love means the birth of a smile, and the smile that erases the tear-blinded clouds, when we meet in the after hour.
Smile the while you kiss me sad adieu. When the clouds roll by, I'll come to you. Then the skies will seem more blue. Down in Lover's Lane, my dearie. Wedding bells will ring so merrily. Every tear will be a memory. So wait and pray each night for me, till we meet again. Till we meet again. We all have been selected from city and from farm. They asked a lot of questions, they jammed us in the arm. We stood there at attention, our faces turning red. The sergeant looked us over, and this is what he said. This is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephones. You had breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore. This is the Army, Mr. Green. We like the barracks nice and clean. You had a housemaid to clean your floor, but she won't help you out anymore. Do what the buglers command. They're in the Army and not a band. This is the Army, Mr. Brown. You and your baby went to town. She had you worried, but this is war, and she won't worry you anymore. Oh, how I hate to get up in the morning. Oh, how I love to remain in bed. For the hardest blow of all is to hear the bugler call. You gotta get up, you gotta get up, you gotta get up this morning. Someday I'm going to murder the bugler. Someday they're going to find
War effort were very significant. Not only serious films, but also cartoons to amuse and poke fun at the enemy. Here are the men varsity singers to perform a song from Walt Disney's Donald and Nutsy Lane. Please enjoy De Fura's Face.
When the Führer says he is the master race, he hut, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace.
So we right in the Führer's face.
When the Goebbels says we own the world in space,
We right in the Goebbels' face.
when the Goebbels says a rapper from the space,
So we right in the Goebbels' face.
Are we not the Superman? Alien dear Superman?
Yeah, we is the Superman, super duper Superman.
That not good.
Yeah, this Nutsy land is good. We believe it if we could. We bring the world to order. Heil Hitler's new world order. Everyone a foreign race will love the Führer's face when we bring the world disorder. When the Führer says he is the master race, we right in the Führer's face. Not to love the good or is a great disgrace. So we right in the Führer's face.
It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, because there is no error or shortcoming, but who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself for a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows, in the end, the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. Theodore Roosevelt.
World War II, the name commonly given to the global conflict of 1939 through 1945. It was the greatest and most destructive war in history and included gigantic struggles not only in Europe, but in Asia, Africa, and the far-flung islands of the Pacific. More than 17 million members of the armed forces of the countries involved died during the conflict. This disastrous war strained the economic conditions of the major nations and left many countries on the edge of collapse.
For many American servicemen and women, the only communication available to their loved ones at home was in the form of letters, mostly delivered with a U.S. government service known as V-mail. Tonight, we will be reading some of those letters to you, and we sincerely hope that we can somehow communicate the great love, fear, and respect those letters contain.
In 1944, a young rifleman went ashore in the second wave on Omaha Beach with General Omar Bradley's First Army. He was later captured by German forces on December 11th. He remained a prisoner of war until he was liberated on April 13th, 1945. Before his capture, he wrote this letter to his wife.
Dear Abigail, as I sit here writing this, my mind wanders back 2 years ago this very day. It was Wednesday, and at 9:30 in the morning, I became a soldier. I've been all over since then, seen plenty too. Some things will remain on my mind until the day I die. A lot of the boys I used to live and eat with are no more. To a lot of people, they're just a lot of wooden crosses in an open field. But to me, they're the best pals a guy ever had. I wish as I write this, I could tell you everything I've seen, but only God knows my inner thoughts. These things keep turning over and over in my mind. When will this war end? How long will it be before I can come home? Will I ever be the same? I am a killer now. I have killed men and wondered about what I have done. I'm not perfect and don't claim to be, but I think I'm right. I remember how you cried when I came home and told you I was in the army. I love you so much. It hurts and hurts to be away from home. They call us brave men, but it is for our loved ones we are fighting so hard. It's going to be a tough winter. I hope this war ends soon. I hope to be with you again someday. Your loving husband, Private First Class Paul R. Lewis.
After his liberation from a prisoner of war camp, Private Lewis returned to the United States and is alive and well today, living simply with his wife Abigail, his children, and his grandchildren.
For nearly every soldier we honor here today, there was a woman left behind. And oh, did the women left behind miss their men. The song, No Love, No Nothing, expresses it about as clearly as anyone can. Performed by Katie Smith.
He saw action in the Battle of the Bulge, where he was seriously wounded. This is a letter his father, a World War I veteran, wrote to him as William prepared to go overseas.
Dear Will, well, I figure you're off on the great adventure. There will be many disagreeable experiences, soul-shaking experiences, tragic experiences, and uplifting experiences. You will see examples of selfishness and courage that will stir you tremendously. I have no doubt you will develop the same respect for the infantry that I have, and the same awesome regard for the medics. I have no fears for you. You will do well. You have the finest spirit of anyone I know. I wish I could go for you, or at least with you, but this is your war. Your mother and I will pray that God will give you the strength for any danger you will have to face, and that He also will give you patience and not give you any trials that you are not able to bear. I believe the Lord upholds all that fall, and they will rise up again. You are serving a great cause. Because of you and those like you, millions of fathers and mothers and children again will be able to live their lives without fear and oppression.
We here at home will be scared what certainly would have been our fate if you had not gone out willingly to prevent the domination of the world by pirates. Good night, son. We love you. As always, your dad. Private First Class William Fee survived his wounds and returned to his parents immediately after the war.
After a month-long siege on the island of Corregidor, U.S. troops finally surrendered on May 6, 1942. Thousands of GIs were taken prisoner and many died in captivity. One of these soldiers captured was 21-year-old Lieutenant Tommy Kennedy, who spent nearly 3 years as a prisoner of war. In early January 1945, he sensed the end was near, so he wrote the following letter to his parents on a scrap of paper he found. He asked it to be delivered by whomever discovered his body.
Dearest Mommy and Dad, I am writing this so you will know exactly what happened to me. If only I had died in combat. It is so useless to die here like this, with no food, water, or medicine. Please use my money to buy that ranch and give both my sisters liberal amounts, and see that Gary has a good car for his first year of high school. Please write Mary Robertson of Hoosdale, Pennsylvania, that her son Melvin died on the 17th of January with his head on my shoulder. We were like brothers. Tell Patty I am sorry. I guess we weren't meant to be together. I weigh about 90 pounds now, so you can see how we are. I will sign off now, my darlings, and please don't grieve too much. I'm not afraid to go, and I will be waiting for you. All of my love, Tommy Kennedy. Lieutenant Kennedy's final letter was smuggled from one POW to another. Each made certain before dying that the letter was passed on to someone else. When the survivors were liberated at war's end, Tommy's letter was delivered to his parents in late 1945, well over 4 years since their teenage son had left for the Pacific, never to return.
The 1940s were certainly dominated by the war, but it was also the height of the big band era in the United States and Great Britain. Here's the new pioneer vocal group, Esquire, to perform 2 jazz standards from the era, which helped keep our spirits high. This is Tommy Dorsey arrangement of Sunny Side of the Street, followed by a British standard, A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square.
Sunny side of the street.
I'm on the sunny side.
Of the street.
Side of the
Sunny side of the street.
I'm on the sunny side.
Of the street.
So grab your coat. Don't forget your hat. Leave your worries. Leave them on the doorstep. My sweet. Just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Hop on a zoodle zag. Pitter pat. You know that happy tune is my step. Life's all me. If you take that beat on the sunny side of the street, used to walk in the shade with my blues on parade. What a drag, old man, getting stuck in the shade. Get him, don't be afraid. Moving on over, feel yourself in the clover. Only here for a cent, who cares? Rich as Rockefeller can't be beat. Gold dust from my feet on the sunny side of the street.
I'm on the sunny side of the street.
March 22nd, 1944, just after coming back from a mission, Captain George Rary was informed of the birth of his first child. Overwhelmed with joy, Rary sent the following letter to his wife June in Washington, D.C. Darling June, this happiness is almost unbearable. Got back from a mission at 4 this morning, and as I walked up the road, a deacon was waving at me. He was holding an envelope, and I quit breathing when the wonderful news was unfolded. A son. Darling June, I am so proud of you. I am beside myself. All the boys in the squadron went wild, and old Doc Finn trotted out a couple of bottles from his medicine chest, and we toasted the fine new son and his beautiful mother. I am anxious to hear all the details. I figure Damon was born on the 19th. I wonder what he weighs and all about him. Tell him he is the proudest, happiest, and luckiest pop in the whole world. June, if this letter makes no sense, forget it. This old hut looks like a castle. The overcast outside is a beautiful blue. I am a father. I have a son. My darling wife has had a boy, and I am a king. I wish I could be there with you. What a ridiculous and worthless thing a war is in the light of such a wonderful event. There will be no more war for our Damon. Oh, my beautiful darling, I love you more and more and more. Sweet dreams, my darling, sweet dreams. Love, George.
Less than 3 months after writing this letter, 26-year-old Captain George Rary was flying over France when anti-aircraft guns shot his plane out from under him. He did not survive and never saw his newborn son. 28-year-old Sergeant Eugene Lawton with the 2nd Infantry Division went ashore at Normandy and wrote home about it. In this letter to his parents in Tarrington, Pennsylvania, Sergeant Lawton articulated beautifully what he was feeling at this historic moment.
Hello, Mom and Dad. Have had plenty of time to review the past 2 months of my life. In the following paragraphs, I will try and put into a few words a few of my experiences. One's thoughts go deep into the past when moving across the water on a troop ship. Long before we landed on enemy soil, I wondered if I would remember all my training. No man knows how he will react under fire until he's put to the test. I didn't have long to wait. We hit water from an assault boat and waded ashore, touched solid ground, and moved at a run. It was so noisy I didn't know we were being shot at until I saw the slugs leaving their calling cards in the sand. No time to think right now. Must find protection. I found cover of some high ground and looked around. I saw some who had gone before us, who had left the battle behind. This is the worst time in a soldier's life, not knowing what to do. The other guys were looking to me as I was the only sergeant left in our group. I yelled to the men on my left and we moved up the beach. So this was my first time under enemy fire. My first night in France. We dug foxholes and placed guards, but no one slept. Overhead planes droned loudly over our ships out in the channel. Up went our anti-aircraft fire, and I witnessed the amazing sight of tracers going up into the sky, leaving a complete mask of red death to any plane within reach. It was a beautiful sight from our point of view, but to the enemy, it meant annihilation. Yes, it was beautiful, but a kind of beauty only a soldier can understand. No one slept. Here was history in the making, events taking place that kids will be reading about in school. Yes, I for one am proud I had the honor of helping in my small way. Please keep me in your prayers as we move inland. Much love, your son, Eugene. This is one of Sergeant Lawton's last letters home. He was killed several months later in Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge.
June 6, 1944. 23,000 paratroopers were dropped throughout the French countryside. The enemy was thoroughly prepared. Fields were flooded and many paratroopers drowned upon landing. Strategically placed machine gunners shot men to pieces as they helplessly floated to earth, and many of the soldiers were scattered and separated from their units, which made them easy targets. Surviving U.S. troopers rallied and captured key bridges and roads against tremendous odds. Private First Class James W. Washner of the 101st Airborne held off enemy soldiers bravely until a shell blew him to pieces. His cousin, Private First Class Charles McAllister, learned what had happened and wrote to Dashner's mother with the terrible news.
My dearest aunt, I suppose this is the first time I've written to you. It never seemed necessary before. I am sorry this letter must be written under such a sad circumstance, but I hope it comforts you in some small way. At a time like this, it's hard for anyone, especially one who isn't good at words such as I, to say anything of comfort to someone who has suffered such a great loss. But at least I can tell you how James met his death, and perhaps that will help a little. When James came to see me before the invasion, I liked him right away. He commanded respect, and his great personality caused us to become friends from the start. We shook hands and wished each luck, and as I watched him walk away, I thought, what a great guy. That was the last time I saw him. I knew he jumped in France, and I was hoping to meet him there. By chance, a former close friend of his approached me and told me what had happened. It was quite a blow. By this time, I had lost many friends, and I thought I'd become hardened to it. But this was different. Jim was my family, the same blood as mine. But the battlefield is no place to grieve, so I made an effort to control my feelings and asked for the details. Jim was in charge of his unit and took over a machine gun surrounded on 3 sides. He crawled forward and began firing so his buddies could get to safety. His platoon leader yelled for him to get out of there, but he kept firing until his gun was red hot. They zeroed in on him and landed a mortar shell right on top of him. He died instantly, but his hand was still clutching the trigger, and as a result of his continuous fire, his platoon was saved. On the way back to my outfit, I let myself go and cried like a baby, but I wasn't ashamed of it. When his son gets old enough, tell him how his father died, and his son's son, for our family must never forget him. Let's replace grief with pride in the way he died and the things he died for, as that is the way Jim would want it. Yes, his outfit has lost a great soldier, his buddies have lost a great friend, but you have lost a son. Tonight, Jim is under God's loving care, and Jim will never again have to experience the horrors of battle. I can hear him saying, "Don't grieve for me. I'm happy here, and when we meet again, we will never be separated." No one knows how heavy your heart is tonight, but if I could in some small way help to take his place, I would like to be your son. I know I can never fill his place in your heart, but we can be a comfort to each other. I want you to let Jim's wife and baby know that if there is any way in which I might ever help them, for them not to hesitate to call on me. There is nothing I wouldn't do for them for Jim's sake. With all my love, Charles.
Many of the soldiers of World War II had premonitions that their lives would end on the battlefield. Their letters were written in advance, knowing that they would only be delivered in the event of their death. One of these soldiers who feared the worst was 25-year-old Second Lieutenant Jack Lundberg, who wrote his final letter a few weeks before D-Day, 1944. This letter was sent to his loved ones in Woods Cross, Utah.
Dear Mom, Pop, and family, now that I am here, I see my chances of returning to you are quite slim. Therefore, I write this letter now while I am still able. I want you to know that I love each of you very much. You mean everything to me, and it is the realization of that love that gives me the courage to continue. Mom and Pop, I have always determined to show my appreciation to you both by giving you the best things in life. But this war has prevented that. If you receive this letter, I shall be unable to fulfill those desires, for I have requested that it only be sent in the event that I do not return. You have had many times more than your share of death in the family. Still, you have continued to exemplify what true parents should be. I am sorry to add to that grief, but please remember that you are in my thoughts constantly, and that I feel in some small way I am helping to bring this wasteful war to a conclusion. We, in the United States, have something to fight for. Never more fully have I realized that. There is no other country like ours. The USA is worth the sacrifice. Remember always that I love you deeply, and I am proud to be your son. Tell Mary I love her, and watch over each other always. With much love, Jack.
Unfortunately, Second Lieutenant Jack Lundberg had indeed written his last letter home. 2 weeks after D-Day, Lundberg was in a B-17 bomber on a mission over enemy territory. His plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire and burst into flames. His body was not recovered until 9 months after his death. Although Lundberg's family had the option of having Jack's body returned to the United States, they chose to have their son buried with his comrades at the American Cemetery in Normandy, France.
Our next number, Madame Jeanette, the story of a French war widow, hardly needs an explanation on Veterans Day.
Berlin fell on May 2nd, 1945. At 2:41 a.m. on May 7th, Germany surrendered in a small schoolhouse in France. The next day, May 8th, officially became Victory in Europe Day. Cities throughout the world exploded in joy. People took to the streets singing and dancing. Blacked out for years, Europe was now ablaze in lights. 22-year-old William Lee Patterson, a first lieutenant in Patton's Third Army, had witnessed firsthand the fierce combat in France, Belgium, and Germany. 2 days after VE Day, Patterson wrote the following letter to his older brother Jack, back home in Monroe, Georgia. It did not reflect the joy you would expect from a victorious soldier.
Dear Jack, the war is over. The war in Europe is over. I can hardly believe it. For it seems only yesterday we were seeing our first action. 2 nights ago, I sat by an open window on a second story of a building my platoon occupies and watched and listened for over an hour as German prisoners, thousands, passed below me. I listened to the tramp of Nazi boots, no longer in cadence, no longer marching proudly. A tired, beaten mob surrendered. 2 days ago, I saw another group of calm SS troops who had surrendered. They still wore their skull and crossbones insignia, but they were no longer arrogant. Their pride was gone. These crack troops with the insignia that had struck terror and torture to the people of Europe, they stopped for a rest and begged for a smoke. The terror of Europe begging. They walked, shoulders stooped, looking at the ground beaten. I was glad to see them go, but we didn't mock them as they passed. What we felt was deeper than mocking. It was more like sadness what we had seen over the past 3 years. Another column came by and I was amazed. Most of them 14, 15, and 16 years of age, with an old man here and there. These youngsters were Hitler Youth, fanatical boys who had been called upon to fight. In America, kids the same age were reading Superman and going to junior high school, yet these boys were now old soldiers, prisoners of war in the last-ditch fight against us. Yes, the war is over. I don't know what the reaction was there, but we heard there were wild celebrations in the streets. But Jack, the frontline troops didn't celebrate. Most of them just read the announcement of victory from the bulletin sent out from division sent to the troops. They just said something like, "I'm glad," and walked away. Perhaps it was a different story in their hearts, or perhaps they were too tired, or thinking of home, or thinking of their buddies who didn't live to see the victory. There was no celebrating or merrymaking, but I am sure of one thing. The troops were glad they wouldn't have to fight anymore. I was. What our future is, we don't know, but I am happy this war is finally over. All my love, your brother Bill.
The war in Europe was over, but the war in the Pacific raged on for another 4 bloody months. Finally, in August 1945, all hostilities ceased. In 6 long years, World War II had been the most disastrous conflict in the history of mankind. Over 50 million people were dead, including 20 million civilians, and entire nations lay in ruins. American servicemen and women were coming home, but not before fighting for freedom around the world. Some were wounded, many were scarred emotionally, but none of them would ever be the same. In 2007, across the United States, every day 1,000 members of the greatest generation are passing into history. And we want to say thank you for their commitment, loyalty, and sacrifice. All of them are heroes, and as we complete this evening's tribute, let's remember the words of a returning combat soldier who was asked how he would remember his fallen comrades. He thought for a moment, looked directly into the camera, and said calmly, "They gave up all their tomorrows for our todays."
One of the most enduring of all American popular songs, "I'll Be Seeing You," was written several years before the war. But during the war, it became to deeply express the feelings of loved ones and families separated by forces beyond their control.
I'll be looking at the moon. I'll be looking at the moon. I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you. I'll be seeing you.
here's Riley, who's going to introduce our final song of the evening.
And now to conclude tonight's performance, our rendition of America the Beautiful.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have a round of applause for Esquire and the Varsity Singers under the direction of Mr. Jeremy Harris. The Pioneer Jazz Band under the direction of Mr. Ken Roberts. And my advanced drama students, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing us to give you this gift tonight. And as we honor our veterans next Wednesday, please remember some of the things that you've heard tonight. Thank you very much for coming. And as we go our way, I'd like to remind you that I want to say right now with all my heart, God bless our veterans and God bless America. Good night, everyone.